Good morning, America. Welcome to Taxes Made Easy. Another fun week talking about taxes and how you can not only understand how to do an offer, but come out on top doing an offer and get a good idea of what you qualify. Again, this is going to be the last part. We're going to use charts again. We're going to walk through it. And understanding this is very important because this is exactly how the IRS looks at or should look at it. So understanding the way they look at it. I'm going to talk specifically about the IRS charts today and how they analyze it. So stay tuned. We've got a lot of news about the economy today, where things are heading, where to try to plan, how to plan for the future. And again, thank you for watching live or on rebroadcast right here at the smartmoneyculture.tv or the smc.tv. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, and excited for this show today. It really kind of gets into the nitty gritty and helps you. That's my whole goal here, is to explain what the IRS is looking at. So before we dive into that, again, there's always the news. It's interesting. I was looking at the news. There wasn't much on irs.gov, but I started hitting articles on CNBC, and I picked out three main articles, all on CNBC, and there's other news elsewhere, but I said, look, I'm just going to contain it and try to get to the main topic because I want to really talk about that. So the first article, and I'm going to go ahead and share these articles so it's a little easier to follow along. And so this article, we've been talking a lot about the Fed. What is the Fed going to do? So this is one governor, Michelle Bowman. And so she's on the head of the Federal Reserve. Again, this is part of the bureaucracy where they're pretty much independent, but again, they're appointed by the president. They do have face pressure, etc., from politicians from both sides of the aisle. But it's usually you want to pay attention to whoever's going against the trend. Whoever is, if they're saying what the powers that be want to say, I always take it with a grain of salt. Doesn't matter which side you're on. But again, it's really confusing. This is one of the reasons the market is having so much trouble right now. The markets don't know what the Fed is going to do. So she came out and she said, well, it's not her baseline outlook. She's saying that in the future, we might need to increase rates to stall or even reverse inflation. So that is a big takeaway. She's looking at the market and saying there's a lot of risk to it. And she kind of dives into it. But the funny thing is her fellow officials, other members on the board, have indicated that cuts are likely. So rather than the cuts, her fellow officials have indicated are likely. So you have some members of the board that are saying, look, we want to cut rates, and 1, 2, 3, maybe 3 times this year, which again, for political reasons, Joe Biden would really love to see rates cut. It would help ease things across the economy, but at the same time, you have inflation raging. So again, this is why the Fed is independent. And so she comes out and just kind of goes through this and explains why she comes out with this and the concerns with the overall economy. So is she right? No. We don't know. I mean, that's the thing. I'm not the expert. I'm not looking at the information. She is. So I wouldn't say, look, this is what's going to happen. But I think what it does is it definitely adds uncertainty to the market. And people are looking at the same numbers and saying different things. So the inflation rates are staying stubbornly high. Especially when you include the other factors that we've talked about before, housing, energy, which when they look at the CPI, they exclude those factors. And then, I don't know about you, our gas just jumped about 60 cents a gallon at least. And I go to Costco and I shop. We're like Costco fanatics now because that's the only place where you can get cheaper gas. It used to be you could find it a little cheaper elsewhere. Not anymore. So this is something to be aware of, and it's going to affect some of the next articles that we're going to talk about. So the next article here, I'm going to go and share that one too. Not as interesting, but again, going to Yellen, who's the Treasury Secretary, and she's again making a lot of these statements on the budget. But again, she's a political. I believe she's a public. Yeah, she's the U.S. Treasury Secretary, political appointee. Even though she tries to be independent, and we've seen her face, she comes out and makes opinions on the board, etc., or on the budget. And she just finished up a trip to China. China being our number one trading partner. Now, China is also the number one cheater. And President Trump pointed this out, tried to take a hard stance on China and said, look, they're gonna stop a lot of this. So she had this 3-day trip to Beijing, and her takeaway, she said she would not rule out any measures, including potential tariffs on China's green energy exports. So what kind of green energy exports are we looking at? Solar panels, batteries, lithium batteries. So China has really cornered the market, owns about 90% of the global market for lithium, for other rare metals that are key in the production of like solar panels, lithium batteries, these kinds of things that are the demand for these are going through the roof as we subsidize and our government puts out a lot of money for green energy. Now, I have solar on my property, on my house. I love it. Plenty of people get it, they hate it. It depends on the company, depends on the deal you get. We were very lucky it was already installed, so we're not paying for it. We're just reaping the benefits of it for another 10 years or so before our lease runs out. But again, I think this is very interesting that she steps away from this meeting with Beijing, and the tariffs really are to offset all the subsidies, and we subsidize our businesses to a point, but China really goes above and beyond to try to crush the competition and then raise their rates. So this very predatory kind of capitalism, and this isn't so much capitalism as it's funded socialism. So the government is putting their fingers on the scales and tilting things severely in their favor, and they're all about creating their own monopolies to go out and crush the competition globally. That's not very fair to our economy, to our businesses, and that's why I applaud Secretary Yellen for taking a firmer stance when it comes to China, because it hurts our economy, it hurts our businesses. So again, she stressed the need to create a level playing field, and that we're just not driven out of business. So again, interesting article. I would read through it if you're interested in this. But again, having healthy trade with China, it is important, but at the same time, we don't want to cut our nose off. They steal our technology. They're not our friends, nor do they pretend to be. Too often our politicians pretend that they're our friends when they cheat as much as possible. So going with the interest rates, the first article, interesting article. Again, this is all from CNBC, so a very mainstream news site. And this is was just published about a week ago when a lot of the information was coming out. But this has a little bit different take. So the average homeowner, or the average home buyer, would need to make $113,000 to afford the typical house. It's jumped 35%. And then the typical household doesn't make $113,000; they make $84,000. So I just saw this article, didn't get a chance to really read through it, and how. So again, this is a new analysis by Redfin. If kind of breaks it down as to how they come up with these numbers. But the concern is, and here's a nice chart. In February 21, this is where things really just change as far as the affordability of a typical home. So here in February 21, typical household made 30,000 more. Today, they make 29,000 less than the average income. Not as bad as the peak in October 2023, but it's still pretty difficult. So there's articles. This is why you get articles arguing that, hey, is renting even better than purchasing a home? In the short term, maybe. Long term, I don't, unless there's another crash, purchasing home is probably the way to go. And, and you do want to plan for the long term. Unless, there's other factors, like if you're going to be moving, if you're not going to be stable in an area for quite some time. And that's hard to predict because life happens. And the thing is, we're kind of at this plateau as far as prices, where prices are just now starting to inch down a little bit. But interest rates are so high. And if they go up even further, the interest rates really control how much you can afford in a home. And so we have this double whammy where we've had the cost of homes go through the roof. Interest rates have also gone, not through the roof, but they're very high. And inflation is just on fire. So the problem with higher energy costs is that it makes everything more expensive. And when you make everything more expensive, all the materials and everything that goes into purchasing a home makes homes more expensive. But when the materials are just keeping up, it's not like contractors are making tons of money. And then, as we saw in 2020 with all the supply chain issues, people stopped building. We're letting millions of people into the country every single year, and we're not building homes, or put a giant pause. So when things get too expensive, not only is that's one of the things that drives up the cost of homes, is when you have distortions in the market and everything's more expensive. It's not worth it to build homes, provide for affordable housing, which again, it's not there. Even rents have gone up quite a bit. So again, be very careful. Talk to a financial planner. If you are looking to purchase, and if you're not a homeowner, you should be considering that. It's once you get into a home, then you can ride the wave. If interest rates hopefully do go down, you can always refinance. I don't think we're ever going to see them at the artificial levels of 2 to 3% on the Fed rate that we had. That was just both sides playing with the numbers. So when we come back, we're going to focus on the offer and compromise. We're going to really dive into it and talk about how they look at it, not only with the offer examiner, but also in appeals, and how to go through and prepare that. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for tuning in here at Taxes Made Easy. Thank you for watching live or on rebroadcast. And I'm going to go ahead and share my handy little chart. I probably like this too much, and so this should look familiar. We have time in months. I might have gotten that a little bit low. And then we have money. So yeah, I can't really rate it. But instead of years, last time we did years, 12, but we're going to stick with months. 12 years, 12 months, 24, 60, and 120. So this is 1 year, 2, 5, and 10. Okay, so just trying to do a little recap here. There's two things that we need to be worried about here. First one is offer amount. How do you calculate your offer amount? asset value plus future income. So your available income monthly, and we've spent a lot of time, we've walked through that entire analysis. I might break that down with charts a little better. But it's times number of months. And just to make this a little easier, we can put some parentheses around here. So for example, earlier we had $1,000 in asset value plus there was $100 available times the number of months, which depending on your offer, we're going to go with the 12 months. So the offer that we were looking at here was 12 times 12 was 1,200 plus 1,000 is $2,200. Okay, looks like a decent amount depending on how much you owe. So again, you've got to throw in this how much is owed category. We're going to change this as we go through here. Amount owed. And we were talking about $30,000. So if you owe $30,000, this looks like a really good offer, right? But then we were playing with the numbers. You not only have to understand offer amount, but the other thing you have to understand is RCP. So realizable collection potential. So we're just going to stay with the acronym. And so this is the same thing, same very similar formula. So it's asset value plus future income. Well, let's do the parentheses times months to CSED. So that's the months till the date. How many months are left before the tax debt expires and becomes unenforceable? So if you start off, let's say we start off with $1,000. So I'm just going to cheat and just put 1K. And then it's growing at $100 a month. Here at this point, if we're doing 12 months for a lump sum offer, which is what I recommend, you're looking at an offer of $2,200 at this point. Now, if you stretch that out, if it has 120 months to go before it's newer debt and it has 120 months to go, then your offer is still $2,200. That doesn't change. And this is what people get confused about. But whether or not the IRS will accept it, they look at the RCP to say, okay, does it make sense for the IRS to accept it? And in this case, if you add a zero to it, that's 12,000 plus 1,000, which is $13,000. That's not your offer amount. But the IRS has to look at this and say, okay, if we don't do anything, we just put them on a payment plan for $100 a month, and we stretch it out to when it's going to expire, can he pay the $30,000 or not? And if he can't or get close to it, then they have to stick with the offer amount of $2,200 and accept this all the way down here. So this is what you have to be prepared to do on every single offer. Well, most people, they're only doing it once. But this is a full analysis, and you have to understand how this works. So we had a couple issues here that I tucked away in the corner, and we had talked about some of them. So one was we dissipated assets. Two was retired debt. Those are two bigger issues affecting an offer. So last time we talked about retired debt, where let's say you paid off $10,000 in credit card instead of down here, you now start up here. So we're just going to keep the numbers simple at 10K. So let's say you had $1,000 in your account, you had $9,000 you spent on credit card debt rather than paying the IRS. So now the numbers start up here, still accrues at the same rate, but now this number is $23,000. You're getting close to 80% of the total number here. Actually, you're very close. If this is the case, they might not accept your offer. So 80% would be 24,000. If you're around 70 to 80%, they might say, hey, you had the money, you could have paid us, you didn't. And then when we add it all together, they might reject your offer. And your offer amount here would be the $1,200 plus $10,000. So it would be 1,120. Oh no, 11,200 at this point. Still not a bad offer to settle $30,000, but so let's say you have money in your 401k, you have some assets still hanging around. You have a little bit of equity in your properties or in vehicles. So that's why it makes sense to really consider it. So I was talking to someone, it was in the last couple, I'm very sure it was in the last couple of weeks. And we talked to him about the case. I went over their options and I told him, hey, this is the option. And I recommended, I didn't recommend doing an offer. I recommended doing a hardship status. And they came back and they were older on Social Security and a fixed income. And the wife asked, well, why don't we qualify for this forgiveness program? And what is that? I said, well, it's all the same thing. It's an offer and compromise. And their future income was zero. They had zero future income. They owed around $30,000. But their asset value was at least $13,000. This was last week. So I remember that. So it was at least $13,000. And they didn't have the $13,000. They had two cars that were paid for. And they were nicer cars, but nothing, we're talking 2017, 2018, and they still had some equity. About $13,000 worth of equity after, taking 80% off and taking a deduction and everything, exemption. So after doing all the IRS, taking off what the IRS will allow. This is not something they could afford. So that's why we said, let's do the hardship status instead. We'll keep you in that status at they still had a ways to go before the tax debt expired. But for them, an offer and compromise was not the best fit. And you've got to be realistic when you look at this. What is the best fit for you? So we're going to assume that it's the best fit for you. So we're going to look at one more thing here. So we're going to leave this stuff alone. So this is what it would look like if you have retired debt, if you spend too much, or if you have too much money equity in your home. We're hoping that will change. They used to be that you could go get a loan denial letter and they would ignore the equity in your home. Been that way for pretty much the entire time I've worked as a tax attorney over the last 15 years. They changed that under this administration. It's just the way it is. They've made things so much harder in the last few years that if you have any kind of equity in your home, they don't care if you can get it or not. They don't care if you are retired, living in a home on $1,200. If you have equity in your home, they will deny you an offer and compromise, or they will add it as part of your asset value. So what if you have retirement accounts? As long as you're living on those in retirement, you can use those as an income stream. It adds to your future income. So it does, future income is income minus expenses, allowable expenses. And you can protect hundreds of thousands of dollars in retirement accounts, and they don't have to be in a retirement account like a 401k or IRA. If you have them in some kind of account that you're relying on for retirement, then you can protect those assets, which is very important. What is retired debt? This is one of the things their analysis does not account for, and it's one of the bigger reasons why people's offers get kicked out, rejected. So retired debt, in a nutshell, is debt that's being paid off. And it's debt that's being paid off in this 10-year time period. So what kind of debts get paid off, or you don't have to pay off, you don't have to continue paying them anymore within a 10-year time period? Child support is a big one. Because kids graduate. They turn 18, unless it's in your court order that you have to support them during college or something like that. And the IRS will acknowledge that if you're court ordered to provide child support and support someone in college, they will give you that. It's something that you can build into a court order. But you have to continue to pay that. Now, another example of retired debt is if you're any kind of major expense that you're paying off. Vehicles get paid off, and it was such a problem before. So about 8 years ago, 6 to 8 years, they changed it where when you pay off a vehicle, they're going to assume that you're going to purchase a new vehicle, and they're going to give you at least credit for $400 of your payment going forward. So there's that blow has been softened a bit. But if you're paying off medical debt, if you're paying off state taxes that you're paying on, anything you're relying on as part of your allowable expenses in calculating future income is subject to this. So just to give you an idea, we're going to stick with the $1,000, the first number. So you have $1,000 in the bank, no dissipated assets. And so we're looking at $100 a month. Let's say year 5, that changes. All of a sudden it goes from $100 in future income to, let's say, just $200. So at this point, your trajectory changes, and then you have another $200 times 60 months. That adds, so here we have an offer of $13,000, but if you take $100 times 60 months, that adds another $60,000. All of a sudden, your RCP changes to $19,000. Okay? If you owe $30,000, they'll still probably accept that offer. But if it changes from $100 to, let's say, $400, you have a debt that's going away after 5 years. Paying off a medical debt or something, and now your available income goes from $100 to $400. That 300 times 6 is going to create $18,000 or more equity, and leave you at $29,000. So anybody that you talk to, and if you can pay $29,000 with retired debt happening, they're going to reject it. They're going to say, you can pay off almost the entire debt in 10 years. We're going to leave this alone. Now, is most debt directly at 120 months? No, usually it's 110, 111, sometimes 117. Usually a few months have ran unless you filed a tax return with the debt and then filed the offer, which happens because people are getting everything together. They're filing their tax returns so they can be filing compliant, and then they file the offer right away. So you're frequently looking at this 120 months or 10 years before the debt expires. This is what's not included in any analysis that I've seen, public or the government. They don't have this at all. They have it built into it a little bit, but they don't understand it. They don't talk about the CSEDs. When I threw in numbers to trigger exactly this, there was no RCP calculation. So that's what you need to be very aware of. When you talk to someone and they're looking at your numbers, if they don't talk about And I would ask him, are you looking at RCP? And this is straight from the IRS regulations. Anybody that knows an offer and compromise should know this. And if they don't know what you're talking about, one, you're talking to a salesperson that doesn't know and can't really tell you if this is accurate or not, or you're talking to a tax professional that doesn't really know. So when I talk about this, I don't explain all of this because it gets a little bit crazy, but I can tell them, hey, your number's too high. When they take it out to when it should expire, they're going to say that you have too much money. Now, I did mention this last time that if you add a 1 here, 130,000 in debt, all of a sudden, look, you have a lot of space here. The more you owe, ironically, the more likely it is that you'll qualify for an offer and compromise. So this is how you understand. This is how it works. And so I'm going to try to throw up kind of a sample chart for you so that you can see what they're looking at. Again, it is important to understand how they're doing this. This is why so many offers are denied or rejected. And so this is something that if you have questions, give us a call, 520-485-7371. We'll go through it and tell you very quickly. I mean, we're not going to hide the ball. We're not going to inflate numbers. And I'll tell you if you can avoid some of these pitfalls, but you have to correct things ideally before you submit the offer. A lot of people think, well, can I just change this and this? Like, well, maybe, but it's that much harder to change it during the offer rather than preparing for it. So there's people that have extra cars lying around. There's some people, they have an older vehicle that's paid for, but it's having a lot of issues. They need to purchase a newer vehicle. There's a lot of things that you can do to move the numbers around in your favor, and these are things that are legal to do, that I would tell the IRS exactly what we're doing and make sure that you can still get your offer taken care of. We're coming up on another break. So after the break, we're going to talk about the charts and kind of look at the charts and this will help show why these numbers matter. And then talk about appeals, how to handle an offer in appeals. So again, you would think, do I really need to understand appeals? Well, it's not that. As long as you understand this, there's not much more to it, but it's just making sure that they're following their rules and regulations instead of hurting you. So we'll be right back in a couple minutes. Welcome back, everybody. In this final segment here at Taxes Made Easy, we're going to pull up actual charts and we're going to walk through them and just kind of go through step by step. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And again, this is an actual client's chart. You're not going to see any of the identifying information on here. So we're going to cut off the top part here. But when you talk to an offer examiner, this is exactly, and they reject your numbers or they do a counter offer. You should always ask for the charts. And the charts mean this is their numbers, this is what they're basing their offer on. Or their increase or denial of your offer. And they always have to have numbers to back it up. So when we submitted the offer, we didn't show that she had hardly anything. It was less than the exemption. She came back and said, oh, $2,729 here. Now there's $1,000 exemption, which is really confusing because the IRS used to list it here. They don't anymore. They only do it if your offer is accepted, and you have to say that $1,000, this should be $1,000 lower. And it used to be that they used to treat an offer if the income kind of came and went out of your account, they would pretty much leave most of the, your bank statements alone. Not anymore. That's changed in the last year, actually. That they become real sticklers about this. So she had a total of $2,989. $1,000 exemption applies, so that will actually be $1,989 in equity and assets. Now her problem isn't, or that this client's problem isn't equity and assets. It's down here, and you'll see this. So this is what her income, we filed and said her income was. The IRS said, oh, it's $4,109, which is incorrect, by the way, but that's a different issue. Food, clothing, when we submitted the offer, was $844. The IRS decreased that number down to $841 and that's for food, clothing, because they don't believe inflation's a real thing. They actually lowered it by $3, which is mind-boggling. We're really hoping they increase the numbers again come May, and about 6 weeks they're going to change the numbers again. Her housing and utilities is very low. So when you look at her monthly expenses, they're around $2,779. And with an income of $1,820, she was more than fine. Now, what the IRS did, and the reason this is the problem right here, is they're claiming their income is $4,109. And what this offer examiner did, the offer examiner completely messed this up. We sent her, she asked for new pay stubs, we sent her pay stubs that had the year-to-date information because she's a college student. So she didn't work during the year, and then over the summertime, she worked full-time. So she was asking for this in August, September. We produced the documents, submitted to her in September. We said, hey, look at the year-to-date. If you look at the year-to-date, this number is correct. But she assumed, oh, well, this is what it says on the last 3 pay stubs. She must be making this all year long. We explained it to her. She refused to make an adjustment. And so this is why we got this thing. So she said, okay, net income after monthly expenses. This is the future income number. So our future income at $1,820 minus $2,779 was 0. Now the IRS is doing their best to shove these numbers around in their favor. They're saying net income is $1,330. So that's the available monthly income that they're claiming that she can afford to pay towards her debt. So this is where it gets fun. Total debt, $66,905. Our original offer, $20. Before they started playing numbers with funny games with bank statements, that was accurate. And we still do get, if someone just really doesn't have a lot in their bank accounts, we still get that assessed. So here they take the asset value, net equity and assets. It's not accurate. There's $1,000. But I guess they did this adjustment to help boost their RCP numbers. So if you don't figure the exemption into RCP, they might be able to. It's a minor change. It helps the IRS a little bit. Again, they're just making things harder and harder for clients, taxpayers every way they can. So they take their gross income number minus the household expenses and said, okay, there's $1,330 a month monthly income available. How many months of future income? How many months until this? He said 95 months. So if you take 95, that's almost 8 years. Just under 8 years. I think 96 would be 8 years. And by taking that, this is their calculation of RCP. So they're taking the 1330 times 95, which is 126,350, plus the net equity and assets. So again, net equity and assets plus future income times the number of months. They came up with RCP of 129,339. Now, did they do these numbers correct? No. They completely messed up the income, but by changing that number it affected everything else. By miscalculating her income in a big way, they took this offer and again, set it on fire. When you get these charts, and you should be asking for these charts, anytime you disagree with what they're doing, you need to understand why. What are their numbers based on, and how are the numbers affecting your case? So yes, there's some math in here, but this isn't crazy math. So the important thing is to contest it, to look at this, understand it, and then say, okay, well, as you go through the numbers, usually these numbers will be different. Current taxes, we have them at 100. They're giving her credit for $672 a month in taxes because they're claiming she's making a lot more money. It's incorrect, but we're going to fight that. So you can go back and forth, submit new documentation, try to get them to respond, and adjust these numbers on the charts. So just because they sent the charts doesn't mean it's a final thing. But whenever you send the charts in, you need to prepare an appeal. Because once they reject these, you have two options. You can appeal it or just let it go. There's no tax court. There's no appeals outside of the offer and compromise unit. Again, you're limited. Your options are limited here. So you need to get as many bites at the apple with the offer specialist. So the person that's actually preparing these charts, and then you need to turn around and fight it in appeals. Like I said, we're taking more and more cases to appeals. So how do you get to appeals? Pretty basic. We're going to move to another form, and this one is going to be blank. I'm going to show you the, here we go. So this is just a blank, test case, but here's the form. 13711. Pretty simple form when you think about it. So you enter the taxpayer's identification, their social security number, their name, mailing address, pretty basic stuff. Authorized representative, best time to call, telephone number. And then you want to be careful with this. So you look at the charts. For each item, you want a new section. So here's your initial section. Which item are you disagreeing with? Why? And attach supporting documentation. And it continues. Which item I disagree with? Why? Which item I disagree with? Why? And then again, you have your representative mark which box they're going to be, how intimate they are with the case and what kind of level of knowledge they're going to acknowledge, how well they know the facts of the case. So if you need more reasons, you can always just print another version of this page, reprint this one page and say, attachment 1, attachment 2, etc. But you only want to appeal what you disagree with in the charts. So if you have some numbers that are just going with the standard, there's no reason to appeal those. And here's a caveat. In almost all cases, the appeal office is limited just to what you appeal. So they're not supposed to raise new objections. They're not supposed to raise new issues. They're just supposed to look at what you're appealing. So it's kind of nice in that matter that you're just raising the issues you disagree with. That's all they should be focused on. If the offer specialist missed something else or made a mistake in your favor, you can ignore that and just focus on what's going to help you in your case. Now, if you can win on certain arguments, you have a valid argument, but you're still going to lose. Don't file an appeal just to lose. You're using a lot of more time. You're clogging up the appeals calendar, and again, they'll say, "Okay, great, we'll give you that." But if we're still going to reject the offer, we're going to reject the offer. So this is you need to make sure this is complete, tax form number, tax periods in it. But again, this is a very simple form compared to the forms that are used. The process, though, that is the key thing. You need to, again, follow up with the offer unit So I follow, when I submit a 13711, I call and make sure the offer specialist has gotten it. And if they tell you, well, you filed this too early, I would say, well, that's nice. You have it in case it needs to be forwarded on. And if anything changed, don't hesitate to update your request for appeal and submit a new one. Because again, we've been burned by this where they told us it was too early, we didn't file it, and then they backtracked. So it's become a problem. And the offer unit, and we're talking the last few months, where they're rejecting offers based on timing issues when they shouldn't have. And we've gotten some of those reopened. But again, it's just the IRS getting harder to work with. So when you do submit this, you need to follow up with the main offer unit, at least monthly, just like you were, to make sure, see if an offer specialist was assigned to your case. Now it goes back into the queue. We're waiting for an appeals officer to be assigned. And you have to follow up regularly I'd say 2 to 3 weeks, just making sure, hey, they know I've been calling. They know I've been calling. And once it's assigned, then you can call them directly. You will usually have an appeals conference set. Do not wait for the appeals conference. Ironically, they consider the appeals conference, the final. That's the date they want to wrap everything up. They don't want to be going back on information. So if you are in contact with them, try to get a hold of them on the phone. They're very busy. They're hard to get a hold of. But if you can say, hey, I've been calling you. If you can communicate with them beforehand, say, what do you need? They'll look at it and say, okay, well, here's some of the issues. And you said, well, do you get this, this, and this? Don't expect the revenue officer to forward everything on. They're supposed to. They don't always. I frequently have to resubmit things to the appeals officer so they're up to date. They know what my arguments are, and they have the substantiation to show that. So they might ask for more substantiation on that issue, and I'll get that to them. And ideally, by the time we hit the appeals conference date, we've already resolved all the issues in our favor. If they don't respond and you're reaching out to them when the appeals conference date comes and they say, well, I wanted everything done today. I was like, well, then you should have responded because I called this, and this day trying to communicate with you and get this squared away. And they'll work with you. They have managers. If you don't like what the appeals officer is telling you, and it's, again, you're right, you can always ask for a manager. And I've had appeals, like I mentioned, for some, on another case, someone was trying to use the RCP for their offer amount rather than the offer amount. And I had to bring that to their attention and say, excuse me, all the numbers are right. I'm happy with the numbers, but you're using the RCP instead of the offer amount. And they went, oops, and changed it. If someone didn't know better, they would think they had increased the offer by $20,000. Made a huge difference. So again, we're running short of time. We're running out. If you have questions through this process, give us a call. We can help people in the middle of an offer. We prefer not to. We prefer to handle it from the start, but we can and we do to make sure your case is given the adequate expertise that it needs and to clarify things. So again, I want to thank everybody for watching. There's just so much here when you're going through the offer and compromise. Now, this originally started by the IRS claiming that, in one of their fraud alerts, that you don't need a tax professional. You tell me. I spent 3 hours, the majority of 3 different hours, and I've explained it to you, but when I'm training my staff, I go over examples and I hammer it. It takes months to learn this stuff and learn it really well. And really years of practice to have it down like the back of your hand. So if you can do it on your own, take all the information I'm sharing, apply it, use it. But if you have questions, get some good advice, call. And again, thank you for watching here at smartmoneyculture.tv. And you can always reach out to us at 520-485-7371 or through our Facebook and website at guardiantaxlaw.com. Have a great day.